Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I can think of three fairly good reasons why I should not be here. First is that unlike the stalwarts who are here, I have never been a print journalist in my life. I started with television and have only done any amount of reporting that I've done on television. And most of that I did in the 90s when television was not as in the mainstream as it is now. The second reason is that most of my reporting experience has been in the world or field of business journalism. And in business journalism, I'm sure a lot of people would agree, and this is true much more of the 90s. You started with a presumption of guilt. You had to therefore prove that you were not doing something wrong. Because if you were seen, let's say, having a cup of tea with an industrialist, the presumption was, like Gar, the presumption was that you're doing something wrong. And the third thing, all through my professional career, I've been a part-time journalist and a part-time entrepreneur. So I come from the capitalist class. And I also recognize that the predominant ideological mood of this country is left of center. Therefore, there is, again, a sort of suspicion that you come with when all your life you've been an entrepreneur. So these are three very good reasons I shouldn't be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. Now, to the matter at hand. You hear about a lot of gloom and doom which seems to be around the media industry, particularly news media. But in my worldview, this is neither anything that is more, neither anything that is less. As with any other institution, as with any other critical institution of our democracy. So there's gloom and doom around our democracy itself, there's gloom and doom around our economy, around our media, around several other institutions, but I don't believe this is any more or any less. Yes, there are excesses. Yes, there are aberrations. Yes, often wrong things are pervaded. But at least I am a firm believer that the core, the substance is very healthy, follows a very, very cogent set of principles, very defendable. There are excesses, there are aberrations, and that, as I said, is a no more or no less in magnitude than several other institutions in the country. And I can speak much more for the television medium, not so much for the print industry. A lot of these aberrations and excesses are aberrations and excesses of inexperience and youth. The industry itself is extremely young. The people who are field reporters are young. The nature of the beast is such that it is a first information report. You are sitting in front of a live camera and talking when news is breaking all around you. So it is the first information report. It is the first visual information report. So you're also seeing pictures. And you are talking as you are thinking. And therefore, when you put the nature of the beast and the fact that it's young and it's inexperienced, there are bound to be excesses. But I think there is an innate wisdom in India's audiences and viewers and readers, which tend to gravitate towards those which are largely credible. And therefore, while excesses and aberrations are there, they do not go down and affect the core beyond a point. They do. They do create havoc for a day or two. They do create even crises for a day or two. But when all is said and done, through a fairly tortured process, through a fairly tortuous process, we do end up at the right point. And that's pretty much what I think all of India's democratic functioning is, that through a process of tortured, two steps forward, one back, perhaps sometimes three back, but we reach the right point. And I think that is largely has been my experience in the television medium. So, as I said, excesses and aberrations, I wouldn't call the core rotten. I think the core is pretty healthy. And the reason for that, and I think there are, one is, of course, as I said, the innate wisdom of our audiences and our viewers who do tend to therefore gravitate towards the more credible. Also the fact that we have a very very plural media. I mean, there are so many news channels, there are so many internet portals, and we have a very competitive media. And when you put these two things together, pluralism and reasonably free competition, you do end up at the right point. And I admit that this is a right of center ideology, and I subscribe to that. But I think that this ends up in leading us to ultimately the right conclusion. So plurality and competition. And I think our laws, the fact that entry and exit in our media is largely free, do ensure that this plurality and competition is preserved. And I think as long as we can preserve these two things, a lot of the so-called problems will be transient and will not overtake the largely healthy body politic. There are a couple of things that I do get concerned with, but again, as I said, I think these are not at the core. These are a part of a learning mechanism, and I thought I'd share just a couple of them with you. One is, as we are rapidly changing as a society and as an economy, I think the pace of change in the last 10 or 15 years has been enormous. The complexity of issues is now reaching a degree which is difficult for any generalist to assimilate. We are making several new laws. We are handling several new issues, whether it's complex derivatives and insider trading laws at SEBI, whether there are new competition laws which talk about concentration of markets and abuse of power, whether we are talking about laws in spectrum allocation, whether we are talking about laws in how public resources are to be auctioned off, whether we are talking about this whole paradigm of public-private partnership where ownership and the lines between private and public ownership get blurred. So India is grappling with a huge amount of complexity and coming up with a large number of new laws which are extremely complex even for experts to understand. What we are seeing as journalists try and grapple with that level of complexity is that sometimes we're not able to understand the context completely, and therefore we end up in a sort of breathless exposition which is not quite getting to the nerve of the issue. So the ability of journalists now to become experts is quite important, and I don't see enough of that. But as I said, this is WIP, it's work in progress. It will happen. But this is something that one often sees. And a related point to this is something that at least I never saw in the 90s, but I'm beginning to see a lot of it in the last maybe few years, is in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, we used to approach government handouts or government line of reasoning with a lot of skepticism. I've seen that disappear quite a bit of late. Whether it is CAG reports, whether these are SEBI rulings, whether these are TDSAT rulings, whether these are TRAI rulings, we seem to be purveying virtually by rote a flawed and half understood government line. In fact, in several journalistic pieces, I'm beginning to see the government is God kind of stance that a lot of journalists end up taking. And I believe that's got to do with the fact that some of this stuff is so complex that government itself is grappling with how to put it through. So the government ends up making errors in its submissions. And since we in the media also do not have the required level of ability to handle that complexity, we end up purveying that. So we end up magnifying what is clearly a wrong handout from the government. And I certainly believe that the CAG reports fall squarely in that category, where we sometimes just pick it up, think of it as gospel, without realizing that any economic estimate is really as good as the assumptions underlying it. It is garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to put in garbage, garbage will come out. And I think that level of complexity we in the media certainly need to develop because the country, in a sense, is changing faster than all of our ability, including our government's ability to grapple with that. These, I believe, are challenges that we need to address as we rapidly modernize and as we rapidly evolve. And these are not just in economic sphere. A lot of these laws are actually in the social and the political sphere, whether it's land acquisition, whether, as I said, it's pricing of utilities, whether these are tariff orders that are passed, because these are no longer economic issues. These are political issues. People come out on the streets because of that. So it's important to understand the complexity and the gravity of these laws. These are challenges that I think the media needs to certainly engage with and have a compressed learning time frame. As far as regulations go, I won't spend too much time on it. I just believe that there are two kinds of regulations. One is regulation at the corporate level, and as long as we have regulation which allows and fosters plurality and competition, we are fine. As far as content regulation goes, I think everybody would be clear that that is something that the media industry has to do itself. We certainly don't need any more legal fetters or legal requirements to write content or tell content in a particular way. That is something that the industry itself has to do for itself. Thank you very much for the opportunity.